Welcome to the Harlan Cohen Podcast. Today, I'm here with one of my favorite people, Aron Ezra. Aron, hey man, you got a great voice.
Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's great to see you again.
Thank you. Have you ever done voiceover work?
It's funny. I did record a voiceover once when actually at my very first job. Now that I think about it, where I was working at an ad agency, but then they ended up not using it. So I was sad. It was for a product that they never ended up actually launching.
Wow, well, I think you have a rich and vibrant voice.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Nice. It's easy listening. You just need like a sax under it, and this will be good. So if you don't know, Aron is because you're Aron, but you are chairman of Plan A Technologies.
Right.
So for people who don't know what Plan A Technologies is all about, can you help people to understand what you're chairman of?
Yes. So Plan A Technologies is a technology company, as the name suggests, that builds all sorts of really, really cool software for companies all over the world. We work with both tiny little startups where it's two people just getting going for the first time and they have their new idea that we come in and help bring to life, all the way through to the gigantic multi-billion-dollar Fortune 100 companies who are saying, we'd like you to modernize this thing or fix this other thing or help us launch something or help us after a cyber attack or whatever it is. And so, it's a lot of fun because every client comes with a very different set of problems that they're wrestling with. And it keeps things really interesting because we get a chance to always work on many, many different kinds of things that we're either building, fixing, or modernizing.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful to add some context here because today, the goal of our conversation is to help people who are new on the job or maybe starting their first professional job. All right. They got the job. They're so excited. They want to keep the job. They don't want to mess up. They don't know how to dress. They don't know how to talk to people. Should they bring their lunch? Shouldn't they? How do you interact? Because most people haven't been in an office setting, and maybe they've had an internship. But I would love for you today to help us to understand during the first 90 days, and maybe 180 days, maybe 182 days, however many days. What's the magic amount of days you think it takes someone to transition to the workplace, Aron?
We hire a lot of young folks who are out of school, and we hire a lot more seasoned people as well. And what's interesting is how different the advice is for someone who is a more seasoned employee who is coming on board and is expected in those first 90 to 180 days to have a plan, to execute against that plan, understand how they're going to, impact their organization. Versus what we're talking about today, where you talk about that new grad who's like, look, I don't know anything about what we're supposed to work on here. You got to help me out. And most organizations have some kind of an onboarding program. Now, sometimes those onboarding programs are fantastic and comprehensive, and they're connecting you with other people and doing a lot more handholding. More and more organizations do not do that, where new grads will get a little bit of an orientation and then be thrown into the deep end of the pool. But the expectations are quite different for young people who are right out of college, who are just getting started. Most reasonable organizations, and again, I will say that again and again, I think probably today, because there are always a lot of exceptions of people who are totally, totally unreasonable. But most reasonable organizations will, give people the opportunity when they first come on board to be paired with a mentor. Usually that's going to be somebody who is not way older than them, but a little bit older and has kind of been through this process before. They'll give that person an orientation to what both the company is all about and what their particular responsibility needs to be. So sometimes, that might be kind of written out in a very formal way where you're watching videos and reading material. Sometimes it's really just kind of shadowing somebody and sitting alongside them as they're doing their work. But, I think for a new person coming in, It's both really exciting and really scary. And a lot of organizations that aren't as good at onboarding new people make that transition unnecessarily hard.
Yeah.
In my own experience, I worked at a lot of different jobs when I was young, and some of those organizations did a great job and some did not. I had one company where my very first day on the job, the guy said, all right, you're supposed to be like our marketing person. Now, this is my second job, so I wasn't very far out of school, but he said, you're supposed to be helping us with marketing. You worked at this other ad agency before. So, do your thing. That was it. I knew nothing about the company. I knew nothing about what my thing even was to do. I was completely lost and absolutely miserable. And so, I think for a new person coming into an organization, there are a few things to make sure you're doing. Yeah. If whether or not they have a great program or not, ask a lot of questions, make friends with people who are there, not only the other new people you're starting with, but also some of the existing people who are already there. One of the main determinants of success at a job is actually, does that individual get along with their coworkers? Do they have friends? And, that's absolutely critical. And you have this nice window in those first 90 days where you are expected to ask a lot of questions. One of the things that I often did when I started jobs, both at the beginning of my career and later in my career, is I would actually say to people, hey, can we go to lunch? And I would just do that all the time. And, a lot of people are like, well, I can't go to lunch today, but I could, how about 2 weeks from now on Wednesday or whatever. And then just those one-on-one lunches where you say, so tell me, how did you get here to the company? What are some of the mistakes you made? What advice do you have for me? People love talking about their own stories and their own experiences. And in asking people for that kind of advice early and often in those first 90 days, several things happen. One, you actually learn what to do. Two, those people who you take the time to reach out to become advocates for you. They're like, I kind of like that guy or that gal. That person was awesome. And now you can kind of touch base with them, not too frequently, but, every couple months, and just say like, hey, how's it going? And it's just another friendly face in the hallway that you can meet. And that was incredibly helpful to me when I first got started. Don't sort of just say, okay, I get it, if you don't get it. Because that's where you sort of run into trouble. And I have a whole lot of other advice as well for those first 90 days. But
this is so great. This is awesome. I love it. There's so much to unpack. I want to know, how does someone, I got a lot of questions for you. Okay. That's so great. That's so interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people have questions. One thing that jumped out was like, when you are at that first job, it sounds like it was a good onboarding experience. Second job where they're like, do your thing. If someone hears this, do your thing, you get to a job and they don't give you clear instructions. Can you walk us through that scenario to ease some new graduates' anxiety?
So one of the things that I think is really intimidating to new people when they're first starting in a job is they feel like everybody's smarter than them. At least most people do. Everybody's smarter than them. They know like so much more. And they're like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to look dumb. I don't want them to think like, oh my God, we made a terrible mistake. We never should have hired you. You're out. I can't believe you asked that question. And so I see this in a lot of the young people today, where a lot of those folks will come in and, something will be, a task will be presented to them. And somebody like a manager will say, okay, you got it? Are you all good? And the person will say, yes, I got it. And they do not got it. They do not understand. And they're too afraid to raise their hand. So if you're in a situation like that, the only time you get in trouble for asking questions is if you're asking like the same questions over and over again, or, you've already been taught this stuff several months ago and you still haven't picked it up, then, okay, that's a different story. But right in the beginning, that's when you should be asking questions. And, one of the things that I always did and I still have it right now, I always have a notebook with me all the time. And so I take notes on this stuff. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
I was looking for my pen. I was trying to be cool during this because I was like, I don't really need to be so cool. I was looking for my pen because you were saying so many great things. And I think even during that conversation, like if you're asking questions and you forget your notebook or your pen,
go get it. Yes.
It's okay to go. So say, hey, do you mind if I get my pen real fast in my notebook? Because like you need to have that. It's hard to remember these things. You don't look like a moron. You look like someone
who cares.
Right. Because I can't remember everything.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so hard. So I love that. So you walk around. So like young Aaron, new Aaron on the job is walking around with a notebook.
Absolutely. And I would, at the beginning of every meeting, I would take notes. Unless somebody told me, don't take notes in this, which almost never happened. But, generally I was trying to understand and categorize, all right, here's this person's name and this person's name, because everybody's going to know each other and you're not going to know them.
So smart, man.
So yeah.
Write down the people's names as you meet them, and then you draw a picture of them.
So I'd be like, this is like George, super loud guy who had a lot of good points. Lisa didn't say anything in the whole meeting and looked kind of angry. And then it would help me remember, like, okay, that's George, that's Lisa again, and for later, and then just, one of the things I think that's really helpful as well is, not only asking for guidance, which is totally appropriate, but understanding the culture of your organization. Because different in the professional services kind of world, or for most organizations, at some companies, it's okay to be suggesting things right out of the gate and be like really vocal. And they love that. But many, many other organizations have a more conservative approach where that is not okay. So for instance, in that first ad agency that I worked at, we were doing a big presentation to a huge multi-billion-dollar company, and they were kind of talking about some things, and I had what I thought was a pretty good idea. So I made the suggestion. I said, hey, you know what? I think another way we could do the ad would be to do it like blah, 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 blah. And I sort of gave my idea. And actually the client was like, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. You should promote this guy. So I was thinking like, I just kicked butt. I did awesome. And then afterwards, my supervisor just was incredibly pissed off. And he's like, we specifically decided not to do that. I've been arguing not to do that. That's what the competition wanted to do. We tried to distinguish ourselves from that. And I was just like, oh my God, geez, I'm sorry. And he's like, your first 2 years in the job, you listen. You don't speak, you listen. It's part of the reason I quit that job. That was, but still, that was the culture of that organization. And so it's important to understand, what's acceptable and what's not. At another company that I was running in the past, we had one young person that we hired right out of school who at first was making some really great suggestions, but then took it too far and was, writing letters and emails, copying leadership. Like, these are all the things I've observed that the company's doing poorly. And would copy like a lot of people on that and was not diplomatic at all. So those are things to just understand.
Yeah. So a couple things just to make sure people understand. If you have your notebook and you're talking about someone being loud or aggressive or unpleasant, make sure you don't leave the notebook in the boardroom.
Right. Yes, for sure.
Or you could have code words. You could have initial, so that people can't decode what you're really thinking.
That's right.
When it comes to, and I'm listening to this through the ears of someone who's super anxious and is so afraid of doing what you did, Aaron. Like, you're like Emily in Paris. I don't know if you've seen Emily in Paris.
Sure, yeah.
And they like, Emily went to Paris, and in France, there's a whole different culture, and she's this American who's disrupting things, and she survives because it's a show by Darren Star. But how can someone who's new to a culture, how do they know to ask this? Like, in that list of questions that they ask their mentor, should this be one of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of organization is this? Like, some of the questions that I would ask when I would first come in, and that I did ask in my first job were like, how can I be successful? What are the things, how am I going to be measured? That's really important because there are these things that people will talk about this. You'll hear this acronym KPIs a lot, key performance indicator. So every department and every manager and director and vice president has their own KPIs, things that they're held accountable for. Like maybe it's how efficient are you? How much money are you making or saving the company? How successful is this new product that you're making? Whatever it is. And so it's important to understand your boss's KPIs and your boss's KPIs, and then yours as well, so that you can understand, here's what I have to do to succeed, and here's what I have to do to help my team to succeed.
Right.
That's ultimately the main goal. And for most of these organizations, when they hire a new person, they want to make sure that is this person normal, like cool, and in turn, like, can I hang out with them? Are they nice? Are they being like difficult? Are they being super weird in some way that's like not in keeping with the culture of the company? Like, that's one thing. But they're also looking at how proactive is this person? And this is one of the big things that a lot of organizations struggle with. Right. The new people who come in don't know what they can say or not say or whatever. And a lot of young people will just kind of wait quietly, like, all right, I'm waiting for somebody to give me something to do. And that is not how you should do things at an organization. Whether or not you're new or not new, when you come into an organization, if you don't have anything to do, raise your hand and ask for more to do. Similarly, if you have way too much to do and it's completely impossible, raise your hand and let them know this is way too much. This is a job for like 3 people. This is not possible.
So I'm thinking like that person who's like, I'm overwhelmed and this is too hard, or I'm like I'm at a law firm and I've got briefs to do and depositions to translate, and
Sure.
And the first year is supposed to be hell, and I'm working 80 hours a week. So am I going to raise my hand and say this is too much, or am I just going to talk to the mentor and say, hey, I feel overwhelmed. Is this normal? Like, what's the best way to deal with that?
You can always go to not only a mentor character or even if they haven't been formally assigned as your mentor, somebody who's been in that job for a year or two already. You can talk to them. You can also talk to HR. But before you go to HR, talk to those other people just to say, hey, is this normal? Because it's hard to know what normal is when you've never done it before.
Right.
So, you have let's take that law firm example. So you have people, going in, all right, I'm going to have to work my butt off. This is going to be a lot. I'm going to be overwhelmed. And you have situations where you can kind of push through it. But then there are always going to be those situations where maybe like 2 of the partners weren't coordinating and one person gave you a crazy amount of work, but then another person also gave you a crazy amount of work, not realizing you had the crazy amount of work from person 1. And so suddenly, like, that's not possible. And you need to raise your hand about that, because otherwise you're just going to fail.
Right.
And everybody's going to be upset and say, why the heck didn't you tell me this? It's super important to over communicate. And to let that your team, your supervisors understand, all right, I still have bandwidth. Raise your hand if you still have time to do work, because they want to make sure that you are as valuable as possible. And they like people who are volunteering for things. But if you get too overworked, you should also raise your hand and say, look, this is a little challenging because, I just worked 14 hours yesterday on this. And now you're giving me another like 20 hours of work that I'm supposed to do for tomorrow. I don't know if that's possible. And so those are the things that you need to be communicating, because if you don't, the supervisors then will say, why the heck didn't you tell me this, man? Or like, this is ridiculous. You got to communicate with us. And so that is really important. And talking to somebody who's been on the job for a year or 2, they can help level set and let you know, like, yes, that's pretty normal, or actually that's crazy. You should talk to somebody about that.
I'm thinking of plan A. You hire 3% of the applicant pool. It's really highly selective. So if you get this job, it's a great job. You're really excited. And you probably think that you and the rest of the team think someone's very capable. So then somebody gets in the position and they're overwhelmed because the work is too difficult, or maybe the coding is more complex. And that person who's feeling imposter syndrome and thinking, I don't belong here, how do you create the dynamic so someone can maneuver in that environment and not feel like they're not enough?
So some of the things that we do at Plan A, not only do we have a formal mentor program, but our HR staff actually checks in with each person on the team on a regular basis to make sure that they're happy. And we have big team meetings, and we have, all sorts of different one-on-ones. So there are a lot of opportunities for somebody to raise their hand. And in fact, we directly ask them, like, how you doing? Is everything okay? Now, for the people who first come in, of course, that imposter syndrome feeling is real and is shared. And there are times where you have to just sort of say, like, I can do this. Let's make this thing happen and go forward. However, there are other times where people genuinely are overwhelmed or genuinely can't do the job. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't stay at the company. We have somebody on our team who just last week is a terrific person on the team, terrific contributor, could not do the job, was totally failing in the job, but was interested in and able to do a different job at the company. This person had made a great impression. Everyone likes this individual. And so we didn't fire the person. We just moved them to a more appropriate job. And so that's also a possibility. And it's something that if you feel like, geez, for one reason or another, this isn't the right fit. Maybe I can do it, but I actually hate it. I thought this was going to be a lot more fun than it is. Or, I have a difficult person or team that I'm working with. You can ask to be moved to another division or another group or another area. Just know that most companies that I've worked with will generally do that once for like a new grad. But if you're like, and actually the second area is also bad, then they usually don't do it again. They'll kind of assume like this person's not a fit.
Right. But I love that idea that if you get into this position and it just doesn't align with your expectations and it just doesn't work, before you leave and start to resent the company or your supervisor or your team, to just kind of step out a little bit and talk to the people in your corner and explain, and then see if there's another move within. I don't think most people think about that. So it's a really great point when it comes to getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. And one other thing that I think is important to note too on this is that most new grads are used to an environment that is very school-like and academic in nature, where you're learning, you're trying your best, you're grappling with ideas, and in most businesses, the goal is not to learn. The goal is in the business environment, it's to make money. And so that's something that is sometimes at odds for a lot of new grads, where new grads will come in and say, well, I don't want to do this. I want to I'm interested in learning for me. I want to broaden my career. I want to understand how to do things for my next job. And they'll actually say that to their supervisor. So meanwhile, the supervisor is saying wait a minute, you're already planning your next job. So this isn't about what I can teach you. It's about what you can contribute to the company. And and I know that that's sort of a more, I don't know, old guy, grumpy, a Smithers type character who's saying this is what's going on. But it is actually a transition that's really difficult for some people to make, where they're like, well, I am doing this for me, not for the company. And the company's leaders are like, no, great. We hope you get stuff out of it too, but we need you to do stuff for the company. You're trying to contribute to the health and strength of the company to make it stronger, not just do something that's going to only be fun for you. And so that's a transition that, every job is going to have things that are cool and things that are not cool. And when you're a new grad coming in, on average, there are more things that you have to do that are a lot of the grunt work as you're kind of learning the business. And some people are really, really not comfortable with or willing to do that initially. Similarly, the other thing I would say on that same note is that In an academic environment, you can complain about somebody and be like, yeah, that teacher sucks. Like, that's ridiculous. That guy was, an idiot or whatever. In a corporate environment, if you say stuff like that, that often is repeated back and is totally unacceptable and can get people fired. So you must be significantly more diplomatic in a corporate environment than you would be in an academic environment, where you're really treating people with respect. And even if somebody's like your work buddy, just understand that no matter what you say to that work buddy, that may be repeated, and that may be shared with HR. And, certain things are really, really unacceptable and can get you fired if you say it in a work world. That in an academic environment, they're like, they're still learning. They're a college student.
Right. I wish there was a list. I mean, people can have some sensibility and understand that, but can you just check a few boxes of just things that you just absolutely shouldn't say or do that might seem obvious, but are just you don't do this?
Well, there's a lot of so for instance, in an academic environment, protest is encouraged. You want to say look, I align with this particular, political belief system or religious belief system, or I believe that this policy change is really critical and necessary. And that's encouraged in academia. When you're in a university environment, you're going out and protesting for X, Y, or Z, that's great. Cool. But a lot of companies will say, our policy is that we do not talk about that here. You can't do that. And a company is going to often have people of dramatically different, political leanings and who feel super, super strongly about it. And the company's goal is to say, look, come in, do your job. Do not get into that here. This is not the appropriate forum for that, both with your colleagues and with our clients and customers. And again, that's something that is a real transition. Because there's a lot that falls under those categories.
Well, that brings up and that brings up the whole idea of your social media and how you behave on social media once you are an employee versus how you behave when you are a student. And can you, does it matter what you do? Can you do whatever you want? How did that change?
Well, before you work at a company, when you are a student, you are a representative of yourself. Now, to some degree, you're a representative of the university. If you do something really messed up, then they're going to say, so-and-so, a student at blah, blah, blah university, and then it looks bad on the university too. But for the most part, most people understand, okay, you're a college student, that's going to happen. People are going to do their thing and you're representing yourself. Right. But as a company, as a corporate employee, every corporate employee is to one degree or another representing the company as well. And so you have countless difficult, awful situations where people will do things completely inappropriately on social media. And then they're like, so-and-so, an employee at this company, and now the company's reputation is actually hurt, and potentially their ability to, work with certain kinds of clients or whatever is potentially hurt based on what one individual is doing on social media that's totally inappropriate. And so that's often grounds for dismissing somebody, whether it's good or not, you agree with that or not. That's what a lot of companies do. So that's something to just be mindful about, is that, as with all things, you must in the corporate world act professionally. Doesn't mean that you can't make jokes, but the jokes should be gentle jokes and not offensive jokes. Right. Doesn't mean that you can't have fun and smile and do all these great things. Companies don't want robots. They want, real individuals. But at the same time, it's critical to be mindful of how you're presenting yourself visually, how you're presenting yourself online, the words that you're using, how you're talking to people, being respectful, being thoughtful. That's really important.
Right. So understand the company's policy when it comes to social media and what is acceptable and what's not. At Plan A, do you have something in your employment agreement that mentions social media?
Yeah, we have sort of a code of conduct for all staff. And so, in addition to being respectful of others and supporting, human rights and things like that. Absolutely. We kind of take it on a case by case basis. We've been fortunate enough at Plan A to not really run into this. But years ago, I worked as a crisis consultant actually for a number of companies, and boy, it was crazy. Some of the things that people would say and do. And, there are a lot of different forums where this stuff can get really weird. For example, a lot of companies have corporate get-togethers and corporate parties.
Right.
Sometimes there's alcohol at those corporate parties, and people will get a little drunk and do things they shouldn't do. And that reflects very, very badly on you and again on the company. And, that's difficult. Now we obviously have a lot more people who are at home talking on Zoom meetings. And in that scenario, sometimes there are people who will, show up to a meeting with some very inappropriate background behind them, and you got to make sure of that. You got to pay attention to those things, and so just always think about presenting yourself in the most professional, polished way that you can.
I want to hit on the corporate party piece, because when there are functions where there's alcohol available or there's a retreat and someone's used to having a few, like, what is your advice during that first year, for those? And I bet you've seen this, right? I'm sure you've seen people like who have just gotten carried away. Mm-hmm. So if there are some rules, because everything you're saying is so important and so great. And what I'm trying to do is also, if there was like a checklist of like, okay, when you're going to a corporate party, when you're going and there's alcohol available, like what's a good rule to follow?
Different people will tell you different things, of course. My advice, would just be to not have more than like one, not have more than a beer, and that's about it. You kind of hold it around, nurse it a little bit there, because, those are difficult situations, not only for new grads, but also for a lot of the older people at the company who have been there for a while, some of whom have let their guard down a little bit more and will get drunk sometimes. That stuff will happen, or will say really inappropriate things. What's more is you have environments where you have more established big company kind of corporate environments, and then you have more, cool young startup type environments, or environment where there's an owner of the company or some very, very senior people at the company who maybe helped found it or are SVPs or whatever, where they feel like they can't get fired and they can do whatever they want. And so it's important to just, at least for your behavior, always be professional, even if other people are being unprofessional. Right. And that way, you can keep everything very above board. You can always say, look, I did the right thing. I didn't cross any lines. Also, I think it's important to understand that the different generations often still have very, very different feelings about things like humor or, distance and how far away they're standing. Not only different generations, but different people from different cultures. If you have a very multicultural and diverse employee workforce. So, I saw as a crisis consultant a lot of times where there were these really sad kind of misunderstandings where one person would be, speaking very, very close to another individual because in that person's culture, that was okay. And that was normal. And they would often pat the person on the back or whatever. And then the other person would interpret this as like threatening or intimidating. And so those can be difficult situations to work through. So I think it's important to just understand, just like in a university, I mean, most universities have the same sort of thing, but you just don't deal with people of as many different generations. But, it is really important to understand that you're walking into an environment where there are probably people from lots of different parts of the world, from lots of different generations who are coming with their own cultural kind of expectations and understandings of what's appropriate. And I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, if there's somebody who's crossing a line, then that's really, really important to bring up to HR.
So I think that's great. And it's great to know that there's different ways you need to behave in different environments. And it's really hard to know the answers to all these different questions. So when I frame transition, it's people, places, and patience, right? It works whenever we're going from one place to another. It's what do I want? What makes me uncomfortable? People, places, patience, right? So this idea of going in with a want, what you want your first 90 days to be or your first year to be, and then it's people. And the people part is really what I want to give people some really great information on how to find their people. So when it comes to if you're interviewing for a position or looking at a company, mentoring, how you find your people. I think that's a really important aspect. Would you agree? Like during the interview process, it seems like a lot of this starts early. It's not just about getting paid a lot of money or getting paid the most you can get paid. It's that other aspect. So even speaking to when someone's interviewing, and if they're concerned about a lot of the things you're mentioning, because it's scary to walk into an environment like this, what are some of the questions they can ask before they even get on the job, or a question they can ask when they're offered the job to really help set them up for success in all aspects, specifically the support and community aspect?
Yeah, I think this has become an even bigger issue over the last couple of years, given how many people are working remotely. And, especially that can be hard for a new grad who, goes into a work environment where they're not actually interacting with other people in an office in any way. But I think, some of the questions that, you can ask are, again, what are the mentorship programs? What are the training and onboarding programs that you have? What advice do you have for new grads who are coming in? Like what you can say to your interviewer is, look, this is my first job. I'm really excited about it, other than maybe my internships that I had or some job that I had, over the summer. You've now seen other young people like me coming in. What separates the people who are successful and end up having a wonderful career here from the people who, end up leaving after 6 months or a year? And that'll tell you a lot, their approach there. The other thing is it's natural for us when we find somebody who we really like. Many of us say like, okay, I found my BFF. All right, we're good. And then just hanging out with that one or two people at the company, don't do that. Fight that urge. That's important. Have your BFF, have your friends and your buddies, but make sure that you are, even if you're an introverted person, you're kind of forcing yourself to get out there. And if there's a company function, go to the darn function. If you're invited to something, you're invited to a dinner or a lunch or whatever, go. You want to be getting out there and doing that. And if you're not being invited, like I mentioned earlier, ask other people, hey, can we go to lunch? Could we, if you have like an employee cafeteria, want to go grab a coffee or something like that and chat for a little bit? I'd love to just get your advice. I'm new. I'm just trying to learn everything. Again, most new people don't do that. And
what
so
about
the people,
sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, I was just going to say the people who are proactive, and not only in their outreach, but are proactive in asking for more work, are proactive in suggesting ideas. That's great. Like one of the things that I would do when I started jobs is I would, after the first 60 days or so, I would write up my observations in like a 3-page little report and just say to my boss, by the way, I'm just sharing this with you, but here's some of the interesting things I noticed. Here's some maybe opportunities for us or whatever. And every single one of those people said, no one's ever done this before. This is great. This is really helpful. And they were like, you met with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I'd say, yeah, I had lunch with all these people. I had coffees in the cafeteria with these people. This person told me this person told me that. Here's some interesting things. I could probably help out with this project and this project and this project. And then they're like, all right, you're somebody who I can turn to. You're somebody who's going to get things done. Don't just wait for people to hand things to you.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I love that. And I have this fear of looking like a kiss ass. I interned at the Tonight Show one summer, and I would talk to the writers and ask them, how did you become a writer? And it was kind of like my thing. And I was really curious, and I wanted to know, I was excited. And I asked this one guy in the and they're like, it was like where they had Snapple and bagels and all this stuff, and Jay would walk in. And
I've been in a couple of those writers' rooms. I know. Yeah.
right. So I was like the intern in charge of making sure everyone had their food and beverages. And I asked this one guy, I'm like, hey, I was just curious, like, how did you become a writer on the Tonight Show? And he turned to me and he goes, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, I will never like you. And he walked out. And I was like horrified.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I was not looking, like, I just wanted to get to know people.
Yes.
Dude shut me down. And I was like devastated. So like, if you ask people to have coffee and they shoot you down in the most, hurtful rejection, like, how do you recover?
Yeah. So I would say two things to that. First, there are certain industries, the entertainment industry being one of them, where you have a huge number of people who are totally inappropriate and believe that it's cool to haze the new people. I had the exact same thing, man. I had the exact same thing when I was, interacting with some of those people earlier in my career. And, and that's just going to be the kind of environment it is. And for some people, they're like, hey, that's fine. That's cool. And for some people, they're like, this is lame. Forget it. I don't want to do this. It's part of the reason I actually decided I wanted to focus a lot more on the business side of things versus the entertainment side of things, because I saw some of the exact same things that you did. Yeah. And you see that in a number of different companies where there are people who will just feel like, all right, the new person's got to get, all the super crappy work to do. We're going to make them, not only serve everybody the food, but take all the notes and carry all the bags and do all the stuff. And, that's outdated and lame, but there's still a lot of companies that do that. I would say that if that's the kind of thing that you don't have the patience for, you certainly don't need to put up with it. There's so many opportunities out there, and you don't have to work at a company like that. The companies where you see that the most, I think, are the companies where there's a tremendous amount of competition, especially like in places like entertainment, in some, things like the fashion world, for instance, or, in certain kinds of tech companies, like you see that too, where they just have so many applicants, and a lot of the people get this like quasi God complex where they feel like, hey, I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. But, you don't need to put up with that. And if that's not the kind of environment you want to work in, there's plenty of other companies out there.
Right. And then the idea of looking like a kiss ass, if you're asking everybody to coffee and it's like, oh, here's the new guy. That's Aaron. Man, he kisses a lot of ass. He's taking everybody out to lunch and coffee. What does he think he's trying to prove?
Well, I think that the people who would be more likely to do that might be other new people who are starting, who are not taking those steps, but there's no reason why they shouldn't. Most organizations, not all, but most organizations, once you're in, it's not a competition with the other people. Right. In a perfect world, if a company hires all these new people, all the new people want to stay and they all end up doing well and contributing. Yeah. And so, I haven't seen that too much, nor have I ever felt that when a young person that I've hired has asked that of me. I think, oh, okay, good. Finally, somebody's doing this. He's or he or she has the guts to, say, hey, let's talk. What can I do to be successful? I want more people to be proactive in that way. So I don't think you have to worry about it from the supervisors or the people you're asking, but maybe potentially from other jealous coworkers, I suppose, who are not doing that. But look, you can't let those people hold you back in life, and that's just going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure you've faced plenty of people who have criticized you. When you're the founder, co-founder, leader, you're a villain.
I try not to be a villain, but
you can't please everybody, and
yeah.
The universal rejection truth of being a manager or an owner is that not everyone is always going to love you and your decisions.
The way that I describe it to the team, if I have to give an individual really bad news, like, hey, we have to let somebody go or something, is that, we are like a collective, and a company as a collective has to look out for the health of that collective. Mm-hmm. And you have to think, how do I preserve our company? How do I take care of our people? And then how do we also take care of our clients and our customers who are paying us to help them? And if there is somebody who is not doing their job, either because they're not able to do their job, they don't care enough, they're actively sabotaging things or whatever, even one really negative person can have this terrible ripple effect on the rest of the organization, or at least the rest of the department that they work with. And so you just can't have it. And if you have too many of those people who are not pulling their weight, the whole collective starts to crumble.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a way to do that and to work through that. But for our new grads who are entering the workforce, I just have a couple more questions for you. And you make things easy. Like, that's the thing. Like, it seems from our conversations, like,
I try to. Yes. Yes.
I mean, you want people to learn and grow, and I think that's a wonderful piece. When somebody is accepting a job offer and they're offered a contract for the first time, should somebody just, let's put you in an interesting position. You can answer as much as you want, but when someone's given a job offer, should they just accept it, or should they, ask for more? Like, I think a person who's starting a job is probably just so grateful to work that they're so afraid. But then from everybody who I've heard advise people who get jobs is the first offer is just the first offer, and you should ask for more. Are you willing to answer that question?
Well, I think I think it's very different for different companies.
Yeah.
So there are companies that essentially have like a fixed starting salary. And they're like, look, this is the salary that everybody starts at. If you want it, cool. If not, no problem. We'll get somebody else. And there are, I'm talking for new grads specifically here. Obviously, there's a whole different set of strategies for other folks, but that is very frequently the case. And so other companies have much more discretion. So, you could say, hey, can I get a signing bonus, for instance? And then maybe the company says, all right, we don't usually do a signing bonus, but we'll do a signing bonus if you agree to stay for 2 or 3 years. And if you don't, then you have to pay back some prorated portion of the signing bonus. It just depends. There are some companies who are totally comfortable with having people who do the same job at completely different levels of pay. And it'll be extremely difficult to figure out if the company that you're interviewing for is one of the companies that everyone starts at the same level, or one of the companies that has more flexibility and is willing to be more flexible. I would say, in general, it doesn't hurt to ask, but don't think that if the company says, no, we can't do that for one reason or another, that they don't want you. That's something I think that people can get really, hurt about if the company turns them down and says, we're not willing to do that. Yeah. So, you want to be an advocate for yourself, of course, but you also have to be understanding that these different companies are dramatically different in their approaches to this.
So what are the words to ask? If someone were to ask the person who, is the final step of the process, can you just model even a conversation or a way of approaching that?
Well, I think, look, it's very straightforward. You basically say, is there a way we can get the salary up a little bit more?
Yeah.
That's all you need to say, or sometimes somebody might have 2 offers and there's a company that really wants them, but the person just got an offer from another company and that offer is for somewhat more money. And then they're trying to compare and contrast. But I would say, your first starting salary has no bearing on where you're going to be later. Don't take your first job based on the initial starting salary. I mean,
why not?
It is very short-sighted. Take your first job based on what you think you're going to enjoy doing and what you think is going to contribute and help you in your career over time.
Yeah. Because,
I've in my first starting salary, I wasn't able to pay my rent. I had no money for anything at all. And now I do. And it didn't have any, your career isn't going to be the straight path for most people, their careers go all over the place and they take all these different jobs. Most people over the course of their career actually are way too passive. And they'll take jobs based on whoever happens to give them the most money. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll take this. I guess I'll try this. And suddenly they end up somewhere and they're like, I never planned this. I had no idea I'd end up here. It's much more effective to be more thoughtful about the positions that you're taking and really think about what is going to give me the skills I need to allow me to achieve more of my long-term goals. Or if I don't know what the heck my long-term goals are, that's okay. What job can I take that's going to give me the opportunity to learn many, many different things and get good at multiple things and also just learn about multiple things. And in doing that, it opens up way more doors for you later. I think today about the jobs that I did earlier in my career. I had so many. And even though those jobs obviously did not work out for me, and that's not where I wanted to stay, I learned the skills that I learned from each of those different jobs. I use every single day as in my current job. I was doing recruiting for a while. I do a lot of recruiting today. I was doing, marketing, as we talked about, in crisis. I use all those skills today. I was a business consultant and helped all these organizations with management things. I use all those skills today, and so the little things that you do along the way will all add up later in life. And making a career decision like my first job based on, oh gosh, this guy's paying me $3,000 more than that guy is way too short-sighted. That's not going to matter a lot later.
That's really helpful. While you were saying that, I was thinking of playing a game with you. Okay. Of Aron, from your first job. Where was your first job again? I know it was in advertising, you're saying.
Yes. My first job was at a big ad agency in Chicago.
Could you say the name or?
Yeah, it was Leo Burnett.
That's exciting. Leo Burnett, a storied history. So from Leo Burnett, your first job, is there somebody that you met from your first job at Leo Burnett that you're still in touch with?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
But a couple of people actually, but my friend Monica is I met on that program as my, when I first got started, and she's actually this really cool producer. She produces all these big ads for, all these top companies, and she actually stayed in the advertising world. But yeah, she's been a friend for a long time.
You could call her up and say, hi, Monica.
I will. Yeah.
First job, I love it. But that's your first job. Like, that's exciting because it's about people, right? So then what was your second job? Where did you work?
So my second job was the terrible job, which is such a crazy story. We should probably do a show just about that because it was so absolutely insane. But yeah, that was a job that I took in. I moved from Chicago to New York, took this job. It was actually an awful job in every way you can possibly imagine. It was like the most disastrous, horrible, everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong for me on this job. And then I took other jobs after that.
But that job, man. Okay. So we always have like a hook at the end, because last time we talked, you had this post on LinkedIn that was, went incredibly viral about someone who was interviewing for a job and didn't know the answer, then showed you how they found the answer.
Yeah, that's right.
Which impressed you. And with this one, that second job, it was a nightmare. The thing is now, you've founded other companies, sold companies, you run a company, and the things you learned at that second horrible job, I would imagine that probably informed you as a leader.
Yes, it did. The biggest lesson I learned from that job is to be honest all the time. Tell the damn truth. This guy that I worked for was so absolutely horrible. I'll give you one tiny little nugget. He told me, hey, I have an office in the Empire State Building, so get a place over there. Now I had like no money. So I took my money that I had literally saved for my entire life, like mowing lawns and having my paper route and like all of the things that I had done for like, since I was a little kid, to move to New York and to get my apartment, because he told me I have to show up to the Empire State Building. So I show up there, I get my apartment in New York. You have to pay first month, last month, and security deposit. So I use up every penny that I had in my account, go to the Empire State Building. His office isn't there. So I call and I was like, hey, I'm here at the office. I'm here at the Empire State Building. You're not here. He's like, oh, I just tell people I'm in the Empire State Building. I'm actually in Connecticut.
No.
He's like, you got to take the train out. I was like, how do I take the train? I've never been to New York. What do I do? Like, what the heck? And so, yeah, we were off to a bad start from there.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awful. Wow. Aaron, I got one more question for you. Then we're going to wrap for today. But I want to know, when someone starts that job and they get to that office and they look around, and one of my suggestions is you find the nicest people, right? You find the kindest people. How does someone do that? Like, is there a strategy? Is there a first step that we can give them?
I think you'll find that some of the people will reach out to you as well. So it's not all going to be on your shoulders, where you have to find like each individual person and figure out like how it's all going to work, and a lot of the people who take a moment to reach out or introduce themselves and say hello, those tend to be the people who are going to be more welcoming and more willing to, have those lunches or just sit down in your office and chat for a little while. Or if you have a question, where maybe you're embarrassed to ask your boss or something like that, you could ask one of those other people as well. And so those people will kind of reveal themselves. Also, you'll have assignments that you need to do. And in those assignments, whether you're building something or designing something or taking something to someone else or just, processing something, as you work with other people, you'll find that some folks have a lot of patience and some folks do not. And so in addition to being nice, I would say look for the people who have patience, because those are the people who are more willing to take the time to explain and walk you through what to do and all of that. And just remember too, almost nobody stays in their very first job. Yeah. That's really rare. So this is, and don't look at it, like I said, don't look at it as a rung on a ladder that you're trying to build. Just look at it as this is one of the experiences that you're going to have in your life, where you're going to learn things, you're going to meet wonderful people and have some great experiences. And if it's bad, there's a million other jobs. You can always take something else. But, try to make the most of it. Try to have a great experience here. And don't feel like this defines you. Your job does not define who you are, especially your first job. You're going to have this experience, understand that it's transitory. You'll be there for hopefully a few years and have a great experience, and then you'll move on to another job and so on.
How long do you know until how long should you wait before it's a great job or a nightmare job? Like a minimum, would you say?
Well, if it's a true nightmare job, you'll probably figure it out very, very fast. I knew by day one that I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. I think on average, though, you don't really get into the rhythm of your job for, the first until maybe like month 7 or 8. So it takes a while, and even then, like you are significantly better when you get to year 2 than you are, even at month 6 or 7. So give it some time, be patient with it, but don't feel like you're stuck. Don't be afraid to leave if you feel like, gosh, this is just not who I want to be. I'm not enjoying this at all.
Well, I love it. I love that you share your journey, and people can go to LinkedIn and they can just see your different transition points. And you can also search up Aron and you can learn about the different companies he's founded and his trajectory. Aron, is there anything else that you want to share if people are interested in learning more about you or Plan A Technologies?
Well, if your first job happens to be at a company that needs any kind of technology help, then please do reach out to us at planatechnologies.com or, as you mentioned, on LinkedIn, where we are as well. Or similarly, if you are really fed up and you want to start your own company and you need a little help getting that first technology out the door, then reach out anytime. I'd love to help.
That's great. Well, thanks for being so open and available. You're very kind, and I'm just so grateful that we're getting to know each other.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun.
It's fun, man, and we're helping people. So if anyone has more questions, and we can have Aron back and answer specific questions, you can let me know, and we'll include some bullet points in the show notes as well. And Aron, man, I'm just so grateful to be here, and thanks for being so generous with your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.